So today we are here with a new chapter of class 10, that is metals and non-metals. These terms are not new for you because already in your previous classes you have learnt about metals and non-metals. In class 8, in class 9, all classes have some of the concepts of metal and non-metal. Now in class 10, we have to focus on the chemical aspect of metal and non-metal. Student, here I want to focus that in this year's syllabus, the CBSE had deducted some of the part of this chapter, but I am going to deal with all the topic of this chapter, but you will focus on only those topics which are present in your syllabus. So the last topic of this chapter, that is corrosion and the metallurgy, that part is not present because that you have to read in class 11. So these parts are already in class 10 right now also. That's why you have to focus on this portion. So let's start the metal and non-metal. So the very first concept is, what are elements? Already you know because you are in class 10. If you are having the knowledge of class 9, you are knowing that elements are those pure substances which are made up of only one kind of atom, like hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and so on. Now this element can be classified into 4 categories: metals, non-metals, metalloids, and noble gases. Now what are these metals? Metals are those substances which are generally hard, showing some luster. They are malleable, ductile, and many more physical properties are there. If you want to exemplify metals, we can have various examples of metals like aluminium, iron, zinc, copper, etc. Similarly, non-metals are just opposite to that of the metals. So non-metals are those substances which are not lustrous, which can exist in solid, liquid or gaseous state, which are not malleable, which are not ductile. So all the antagonist property of this metal is the non-metal. If we are coming to the examples, we can have carbon, sulfur, chlorine, fluorine, etc. Now, if we are talking about the metalloids, what are these metalloids? So students, metalloids are those substances which shows the property of both metals as well as non-metals. So in the metalloids, we are having 5 or 6 metalloids in our periodic table, like silicon, germanium, etc. So metalloids are the intermediate, or we can say it is a borderline of metal and non-metal. It shows the property of both metals as well as the non-metals. Now the last category is noble gases. Noble gases are actually group 18 elements. If you do not understand the periodic table, then you can just read it as those substances or those elements which are non-reactive in nature, which are inert in nature, are called as noble gases. So we are having here example: helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, radon, etc. Already in class 9, you have read about the octet rule. So these noble gases, they have complete octet. They are already stable. So they do not need to react with any of the other substances. That's why they are termed as noble gases. So these are the classification of elements. Now we have to read only about this metal and non-metal. In this chapter, we are not going to focus on metalloids and noble gases. We are only here to focus on metals and non-metals. Now look on the physical properties of metals and non-metals. Now, let's have a look on the physical properties of metal and non-metal. Already I explained many times that physical properties are those properties which we observe by just watching. We are not talking here about the chemical composition. We are only talking about the appearance or the thing which we can observe by just watching and doing some physical activity. Now here are some points which shows the differentiation between metal and non-metal or the physical property of metal and non-metal. Here I have given a comparative study so that you can understand it very easily. Now, look at the first point. Metals, they are generally hard. Some exceptions are there like lithium, potassium and sodium. Lithium, potassium and sodium are those metals which can be cut with the help of a knife also. They are so soft that they can be cut with the knife. So they are generally hard except these metals. Students, here I want to focus one point that exceptions are very important, because in CBSE board examination many a times these exceptions are only asked as questions from this physical property of metal and non-metal. So the very first point are metal is generally hard except lithium, sodium and potassium. Now, regarding the non-metals, they are soft and brittle. Brittle means if you just throw it or if it fall down, it will break into pieces. Brittle means it will break into pieces. So they are soft and brittle. The second point is metals are lustrous. Lustrous means shining surface. In the pure state, metals generally shine. They have a shiny appearance. So we called it as metals are lustrous. And due to this property of metals, they are used for making ornaments, jewelries, etc. So metals are generally lustrous, means shiny. In comparison of this, non-metals are non-lustrous, means they are not having any type of sun, except iodine. Here I want to focus one more point, that one more exception is there other than iodine, and that is carbon. Carbon exists in two allotropic form, diamond and graphite. Diamond is a most shiny substance, already you know. Since in your NCERT only iodine is given, that's why here I have only written iodine. But you have to remember that the diamond, which is the form of carbon, is also the exception of this lustrous property. Generally, non-metals are non-lustrous except diamond and iodine. The third point is metals are malleable. Malleability is one of the property of metal which states that metals can be bitten into a thin sheet. So, metals are malleable means they can be bitten into thin sheet. When hammered, it become thin sheet. But this non-metal, they are not malleable. Already in the first point, we had discussed that it is brittle. So when we hammered a non-metal, it will break into pieces. It will not convert into thin sheet. That's why they are not malleable. The fourth point is metals are ductile, means it can be drawn into thin wires. So property of metal to be drawn into thin wires is called as ductility. So metals are ductile but non-metals are not ductile. So non-metals neither malleable nor ductile. So here we have to remember ductile means to be drawn into thin wire, and this is B, thin sheet. Now the fifth point is metals are good conductors of heat, having very high melting point. So you can make it 2 points. that metal is having very high melting point while the non-metals have very low melting point. And the second one is metals are good conductor of heat and non-metals are bad conductor of heat. That's why all the utensils are made up of metal, because we need heat. So all the utensils which we use in our homes are made up of metals. But here I have written one exception also. Since the non-metal are non-conductor or bad conductor, except graphite. Graphite is one of the allotrope of carbon. So graphite is a very good conductor of heat. So here it is an exception. Now the next point is metals are good conductors of electricity, while the non-metals are bad conductor of electricity. And here also the exception is same, that is graphite. Here I have written carbon. Since graphite is one of the form of carbon, that's why I have written carbon over there. So if you just merge these 2 points, then metals are good conductor of heat and electricity, while non-metals are bad conductor of heat and electricity except graphite. Students, here I want to notice I want to make one more point here so that your focus should be there. The most, or we can say the best conductor of electricity is silver. So घरों में सिल्वर की वायरिंग हम क्यों नहीं करते? अगर बेस्ट कंडक्टर सिल्वर है तो because that is very much costly. So copper wiring generally we do. So copper is the second best good conductor of electricity, but the best conductor of electricity is silver. Now the next point is they are sonorous. Sonorous means sound producing. You have seen the iron bell present in your school. When anyone hammered it, or if anyone struck a hard object against that iron, then what will happen? It creates some sound. So metal have this property that जब भी उस पे beat करते हैं तो sound आता है. वो जो sound produce करने की property है, that is called as sonorosity. So metal are sonorous while the non-metals are non-sonorous. The next property is metal is having very high density and very high tensile strength. Tensile strength means ability of any object to resist the aberration. So its density is also very high and tensile strength is also very, very high. While the non-metals have low density as well as low tensile strength. Last one is metals are generally solids except mercury. Here one more exception is there, except Hg, which is mercury. So all metal are solid except mercury, while non-metal exist in all the state, solid, liquid and gas. For solid, we can take the example of carbon. Carbon is a non-metal which is in solid state. For liquid, we can take the example of bromine. Bromine is a non-metal which is in liquid state. And for gaseous, we are having so many examples like oxygen, nitrogen. So these are non-metals which are gaseous in state. So non-metal can exist in all of the 3 states. So these are the physical property of metal and non-metals. I have just given you the comparative study so that you can understand it betterly. So students, again I am telling, focus on the exception points mainly. Now, on the basis of these physical property, we can now define the metal and non-metal. So let's have a look on the definition of metal and non-metal. So after the physical property, let's have a look on the definition of metals and non-metal. Till class 9, you can define metal as the substances which are lustrous, which are a very good conductor of heat and electricity, which are malleable or which are ductile are called as metals. And non-metals are those substances which has not lustrous property, which are not sonorous, which are neither malleable nor ductile, or bad conductor of heat and electricity. But in class 10, you have to add one more very important chemical aspect of metal and non-metal. So in class 10, when you are going to define the metal, you have to write those elements which lose electrons and form positive ions are called as metals. So metal have tendency to lose the electron, to donate the electron. So if they loses the electron, definitely a positive charge will develop on them, and that's why they are called as electropositive. So all the metals are electropositive. You can see an example over here. This sodium becomes sodium ion with the loss of 1 electron. So this is the chemical definition of metals, and in class 10, teacher will expect this definition from you. That is, the element which lose electron and form positive ions are called as metals. Unlike the metals, non-metals are those elements which gain electrons and form negative ions. Definitely, if some element gains the electron, a negative charge develops on them and they become an ion. So, non-metals are generally negatively charged ions, or they form anions, while the metals, they form the cations. So, since it gains the negative charge, that's why they are called as electronegative. So, here is one of the example. This chlorine atom, when gains 1 electron, it becomes chloride ion. So this is the definition of metal and non-metal. Metals are electropositive while the non-metals are electronegative. So in this lecture, we had just introduced the chapter metal and non-metal with the definition of metal and non-metal and the physical properties of metal and non-metal. In the next lecture, I will continue our topic with the next topic of this chapter. Till then, thank you.